Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today is part 2 of our 2025 KaffeBox Advent Calendar Blind Taste Test Ranking Series. This series will be broken down into 5 parts, with part 1 featuring coffees 1 through 6, today's video featuring coffees 7 through 12, part 3 featuring coffees 13 through 18, and part 4 featuring coffees 19 through 24, with the winner of each of those videos, as well as a couple of wildcards, making it to our final video to determine our favorite coffee from the 2025 KaffeBox Advent Calendar. So let's go ahead and introduce you to the coffees that will be featured in today's video, beginning with day 7, which is the El Rodeo, a double fermented wash processed Colombia from Slöinge, based out of Slöinge, Sweden. Day 8, we have the Mr. Mengeche Derso, a natural processed Ethiopia from Swerl, based out of Falkenberg, Sweden. Day 9, we have the Lorena Jimenez, a wash processed Costa Rica from Prolog, based out of Copenhagen, Denmark. Day 10, we have the Eber Tocto, a honey processed Peru from Jacu, based out of Ålesund, Norway. Day 11, we have the El Mirador, a wash processed Guatemala from Lippe, based out of Oslo, Norway. And day 12, we have the Run'eto Kii AA, a wash processed Kenya from Paula, which I believe is based out of Trondheim, Norway. Yes, Trondheim, Norway. All right, so let's go ahead and move these out of the way for the time being. And as always, none of these cups are labeled anywhere except on the bottom. We just like to shuffle them around for good measure, as it also gives us an opportunity to discuss what we have on our hands here today. And we'll start with the favorite, and I do believe the favorite might be the natural processed coffee, believe it or not, largely because that does come from my favorite coffee roaster on this table, which is Swerl. And interestingly enough, I do have familiarity with every single one of the coffee roasters that are featured in this video. There are a couple, I want to say Slöinge and Paula. I don't believe that we have any full reviews of their coffee, but I have had some of their coffees either at a coffee shop or in previous KaffeBox Advent Calendar series. And then outside of that, I do believe that the biggest wild card is going to be that interesting Colombian coffee at the beginning, which was, I can't remember who the coffee roaster is on that one, but it is a double fermented wash processed Sidra and Gesha combination. So that in itself is a pretty interesting varietal combination. And then the underdog is probably going to be our key as well, given that I'm not the biggest fan of Kenyan coffees. And even though a different Kenyan coffee won our first blind taste test, that one did come from one of my favorite coffee roasters. So this one is going to be from a coffee roaster that I'm not quite as familiar with or as big of a fan of, but we will see what happens with that. All right, I'm going to be looking for our more processed coffee in the hopes that I can detect it before we take a sip so it doesn't hinder the palate. But we'll go ahead and start with this one right here, cup number 1. This one's, okay, a little bit more developed than I would necessarily prefer. I have an immediate guess. I do think that it has to be one of our wash processed coffees right off the bat, but I'm not entirely sure which one. I do believe probably, well, all of our wash processed coffees I want to say are Central American or the Kenya. So I don't think it's our Kenya. I'm going to place it right here for right now, actually, so we have some space. Not my favorite. I'm going to move on to this one right here, cup number 2. This one, it's our Kenya, and it smelled like our Kenya. That's my first thought when I picked up this coffee. It's very bright. I'm going to put it right here for right now. I definitely like it more than this one right here. All right, let's go ahead and move on to this one, cup number 3. Okay, well, that's kind of interesting. I can't tell too much about this coffee, truth be told. I'm going to place it right here for right now. I think as it's cooling though, I'm getting a little bit of a sense that it might possibly be our Guatemalan coffee, largely because it does have some more traditional characteristics to it, and it's much more reminiscent of some Guatemalan coffees I've had recently. So we'll go ahead and move on to this one right here, cup number 4. Oh, this one is actually our natural. So I'm going to hold off on this one right now. It definitely has the natural aroma to it, so I don't want to hinder my palate too much for the next couple of coffees, so we'll go ahead and move on to this one right here, cup number 5. This one right here is actually not bad, and it's a little bit more intense overall. So I do have some early guesses as to what this coffee might be, but right now I'm actually going to move it all the way up to first place. And that takes us to our final coffee, cup number 6. This one right here, I do believe, is actually going to be our Guatemalan coffee. So I changed what I thought originally. We'll go ahead and move these down. Now I'm beginning to wonder what that potentially Guatemalan coffee was actually, but go ahead and move on to the final coffee right here. This one I believe is going to be our natural. That is most certainly our natural. And it's quite clean for the natural, so it did come through for me. I am very glad to hear that. I'm going to put this coffee all the way up there in first place for right now. A lot of shuffling around to get it where it's supposed to be. Okay, so I think the early guesses I have are the Kenya, the natural, Ethiopia, which were the ones I was fully expecting. And then outside of that, I think the Guatemala is pretty obvious. So let's run through these one more time and we'll start taking some guesses. Yeah, this one right here, I believe it's probably going to be our Costa Rican coffee. So that is number 9. And my main reason for that guess is I do believe, based off previous history and familiarity, that Prolog might be the most developed coffee roaster on this table, and this one does have just a little bit more development than I would necessarily like. Not entirely sure what that one is still. This one right here is our Guatemala though. And that is number 11. I think this was our Kenya. And definitely our Kenya, without a question. I think that was 12. And that leaves 3 coffees, so we'll see what they are. As this one's cooling, I am not liking it as much, and I'm probably going to move it down. I have a sneaking suspicion that this is actually our weird double fermented Sidra Gesha combination, because at first it was fine, but the second time I'm trying it, I am getting a pretty prominent spiced characteristic to it, and it's a little bit more citric than I would necessarily enjoy. Oh yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of this one. I'm going to move it down. Where do I want to move it? I think I still like it more than the... Actually, the more it's cooling, the less I'm liking it. I'm going to move it down below the Kenya, what I think is the Kenya. And that would make it number 7. Should just double check my work. 7, yeah, the El Rodeo. And that should make this one our natural, which I believe is number 8. And by process of elimination, that should make this one our honey processed Peru. I can taste a little bit of processing to it. It's not terrible though. I might actually move that one up. I'm gonna move that one up. So what do we have here? I think that this was our Kenya. I think that this one was our... If this is our Kenya, then I want to move it above our Kenya actually. And that means our... Okay. So let me run through this just so I make sure I have everything correct. So this one I believe was our Costa Rican coffee, which was number 9. So it should say 9. This one right here I believed was our interesting spiced Sidra coffee, the El Rodeo, which is number 7. This one right here I said was 11, which I believe was our... that's our wash processed Guatemala. Let me make sure. Yes, 100%. And then this one right here I said then was our Peru, so that means our Kenya. Actually, I'm going to move then. And then I'm going to double check and make sure that this is our Kenya. Yes. Okay. I'm 100% confident on what these coffees are, and I'm very happy with my placement, actually. This one improved the most after trying it for the first time. Now, let's see how we did. So this one right here, I said was our wash processed Costa Rican coffee, so it should say number 9 for the Prolog, and it is. As mentioned, the development's what actually gave it away. Outside of that, I think that maybe I could have potentially got tripped up between it being a Guatemalan coffee, because it does have the Central American, more traditional characteristics to it. It is a little bit more bright than I would necessarily expect, so just gonna glance real quick. What are the notes that they have for this one? Round and sweet, orange, caramel. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense then, especially with the orange. This one right here I said was our weird spiced coffee, and the more I tried it, the less I liked it, so it should say number 7. And it is. Well, it'll make for an interesting time trying it on its own, because I have a feeling that that coffee is going to be a bit more strange than even I'm experiencing right now, but the kind of giveaway was the interesting spiced characteristic. And what are the notes that they have for this one on here? They have an anise note listed on there. And the stone fruit, so it makes a lot of sense why I was getting a fair bit of fruit at the start, but as it cooled, there was a lot of spiced characteristics. Okay, this one right here I said was number 11, which I believe is our Guatemala. And that is correct. As obvious as possible, very Central American. I mean, the first time I picked it up, I was immediately able to tell that's exactly what this coffee was. So very straightforward on that one. This one right here I said was our Kenya, same thing, very straightforward. So it should say number 12. And we got number 12. Very Kenyan-like right from the start. And that leaves our final 2, and we will see how we did. I'm 100% confident that this is our natural, so this one should be our honey processed Peru number 10. And it is. This one improved the most from the first time trying it, and this one improved the least, so I think I essentially just swapped these two. It's actually quite nice. So this one has potential to actually make it as our wild card, so we'll see how that plays out. But that means that our winner is the natural processed Ethiopia. So it should say number 8, and it does. I'm both somewhat surprised, but also not surprised at the same time, because my 2 favorite coffee roasters that I believe are in this advent calendar, I actually don't know the rest of the coffee roasters that are featured in here. I don't believe that Café Circular is going to be in this advent calendar, but as a result, Frucht and Swerl should be my 2 favorite coffee roasters featured in this advent calendar, and both of them have taken home first place. So it's surprising, because Frucht won with a Kenyan coffee and Swerl won with a natural Ethiopian coffee. But given that I do tend to prefer their roast style and their profiles of their coffees, then it makes a lot of sense why they did finish first place. But this one, it's going to be a pretty decent contender to win it, largely because it does come out a little bit cleaner. So I'm happy with that coffee. And then of the things that stand out, this coffee is very interesting. But yeah, I'm going to leave this one at that. This right here has been part 2 of our 2025 KaffeBox Advent Calendar Blind Taste Test Ranking Series. Thank you for watching.